Hello, hello. Good morning. I think it's still morning. How is everyone out there? I love it. And I just want to say thank you for being here. It is such an honor to be here with you today on behalf of the nearly 13 million working people in the AFL-CIO and on behalf of working Americans everywhere across this country. I cannot tell you how powerful it is to be part of this celebration. For someone who, to me, is an unsung hero in our national story, who has inspired millions of women, millions of workers, and is directly responsible for so many of the rights and benefits we have as working people today across this country. Now, I think about Frances Perkins a lot, a glass ceiling breaker, someone who has opened doors for people like me to have a seat at that leadership table. She gave this great speech at the American Association of University Women in 1939. She was 6 years into her role as the Secretary of Labor, first woman, of course, cabinet member, we know. It was at the tail end of the Depression, and the New Deal had been implemented. And as she went to the stage, she pulled out this little handwritten note that she had written actually 8 years earlier. And it had scribbled down on this little, you can imagine this piece of paper, a list of ideas that at the time she thought would be good for policymakers to consider. She thought the government should think about shorter working hours, right? Higher wages, help for the elderly and unemployed, abolishing child labor, measures for industrial safety, and the right to organize a union and bargain collectively. Those ideas that as she gave that speech were all now a reality. And she said they were made possible because at no point did anyone in the administration say, "We're satisfied." That's good enough. President Roosevelt, Secretary Perkins, every worker who stood with them, they kept fighting. And as Frances Perkins said in that speech, and I quote, "A healthy discontent keeps us alert to the changing needs of our time." President Biden, since you were first coming up in the Senate, you've led with that same spirit that Frances Perkins was talking about. That ability to say, we are not satisfied, that's not good enough for workers and families all over this country. They deserve dignity, they deserve respect, they deserve a fair shot. Because of you and Acting Secretary Julie Su and this team, we have taken massive steps forward these last 4 years. For the first time in history, a president of the United States stood with union members on a picket line. We have seen a Department of Labor that actually works for working people. We've seen overtime expand and non-competes banned and generational investments in this country that are creating millions of good union jobs. Nothing short of amazing. It's a historic record. And we're going to move forward with that same healthy discontent that Secretary Perkins spoke about. We're going to defend that record and fight to build on it every single day. And I am so honored now to introduce someone who has led the Department of Labor in a way that Secretary Perkins would be damn proud of. She has taken the fight to anyone who tries to exploit working people. She has stood with our unions. She has turned DOL into a true house of labor. Yeah. And I'll just say, I have watched her, and I have seen how she has helped navigate through conflict all across this country. When we've seen workers rising up in historic numbers, she has been there and helped with contract fights and settle strikes and really delivered for working people. So with that, it is my great honor to introduce Acting Secretary of Labor, Julie Su.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much. Please have a seat. Thank you, and thank you so much to President Schuler. On a day that we are talking about history-making women, it is phenomenal to have worked alongside you and to have had a front row seat to your history-making leadership. And I also want to thank my friend and colleague, Secretary Deb Haaland, for making the announcement about this monument here at the Frances Perkins Building today. So this is no ordinary day at the Department of Labor, not only because we honor Frances Perkins, by all accounts, the most consequential labor secretary our country has ever seen, but this day is really special because we are also doing something else. So today, we are at the Department of Labor. We are honoring a Secretary of Labor with all of you, dozens of labor leaders and labor organizers and our labor champions in Congress. And so it's really no surprise to anybody who knows President Biden that we are doing this here today all together. It's sort of like that commercial about Reese's peanut butter cups. President Biden and labor just go together. Now, Mr. President, you have made history time and time again with your commitment to working people. And while you are here to honor one of my predecessors, we're here to induct you into the Labor Hall of Honor. Now, the Hall of Honor is how we acknowledge the labor heroes of America. And as we reflect on your legacy, Mr. President, the way that you always had workers' backs, the way that you put workers first, there is really no one like you. My fellow cabinet members know this, but in the Oval Office across from your desk, you hung a portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt, of course, the president that named Frances Perkins labor secretary. And Frances Perkins was no bystander to history. She lived at its fiery edge. She witnessed the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911, a horror that took 146 garment workers' lives, mostly immigrant women and girls. And it was there, in the ashes of that tragedy, that she made the decision to devote her life to justice for workers. And it's a reminder that how we use our power matters. Now, President Biden promised to be the most pro-worker, pro-union president this country has ever seen. And he has gotten up each day and delivered on that promise. Never before has a president wielded the power of the office so unapologetically on behalf of the people who break their backs, building our bridges, teaching our children, picking our crops, nursing our sick, making the things we rely on, connecting our communities, and making our country function. And never before has a president so thoroughly dismantled the rusty machinery of trickle-down economics. The decades-long con that has told working people to just be patient while CEOs got rich. We know who's in the room today, obviously. Mr. President, you haven't just spoken about being pro-worker, you have acted on it every single day. From the outset, you told Amazon warehouse workers from Bessemer, Alabama to Staten Island, New York, that the right to organize was theirs, full stop, without interference, without coercion, and without the corporate bullying that's all too common. As President Schuler already mentioned, you are the first sitting president to walk a picket line, a sitting president throwing his weight behind labor's most fundamental first principle of the way to exercise power and resistance. You have protected workers' wages and benefits and made it clear that federal dollars are not blank checks. That under your watch, unprecedented federal investments in infrastructure, manufacturing, clean energy, and our environment don't just repair roads and replace pipes and build factories, but build lives by creating good jobs that sustain families and communities. This is not empty rhetoric or fleeting gestures. These actions are seismic. When you said unions make America strong, it mattered. And today, unions are more popular than they have been in my lifetime, maybe even in yours, Mr. President. Since you came to office, union election petitions have doubled, and 400,000 workers have joined a union for the first time. Pensions that were on the brink of collapse have been salvaged, allowing workers to retire with security and dignity, the security and dignity that they earned. Under your leadership, worker fatalities and injuries are down, and employers who hire children to do dangerous jobs know, not on your watch. Under your leadership, the department and the National Labor Relations Board have roared back to life, enforcing laws with the ferocity that workers deserve. NLRB Chair Lauren McFerrin and General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzo, thank you for showing how that is done. Under your leadership, you said that a worker-centered president should have a worker-centered trade strategy. And U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai showed us how that is done. You've said again and again, collective bargaining works. And on your behalf, I have been at the bargaining table more times than several of my predecessors combined. We've set a new standard, not just for the number of collective bargaining agreements that we've helped achieve, but the nature of our engagement. We come to the table not to pressure parties to come to an agreement, but to achieve outcomes that value workers for what they are worth. When dock workers on the East Coast and the West Coast were negotiating their contracts, a lot of people said, invoke Taft-Hartley, the way your predecessors have done in the past. In fact, when companies said to me, just use Taft-Hartley, this president did it, I would look them in the eye and say, do you know who my boss is? That is not going to happen. And under your watch, workers from auto workers to airline flight attendants, from hospitality to healthcare, from actors and writers to machinists to longshoremen have won record contracts. And those gains, most of them are locked in for the next 4 years or more. Under your leadership, Mr. President, workers organizing has been seen not as a threat to democracy, but the beating heart of democracy. So, thank you, Mr. President, for your courage, for your clarity, and your unwavering commitment to the simple but revolutionary idea that workers deserve their fair share. Thank you for nominating me 2 years ago to be your Secretary of Labor, and for entrusting me and the people who work in the Francis Perkins building with the profound responsibility to help you deliver on your promise to the working people across this country, that you saw them, you heard them, and you were going to fight for them. Only under your leadership would the things that we've accomplished even be possible or imaginable. And the story of that generational impact has still yet to be fully told. To me, the Hall of Honor is about making sure that those who have shaped our country's labor history are forever enshrined for all to see and to learn about. I have inducted working people, farm workers, garment workers, LGBTQ workers, into the Hall of Honor. Those workers have changed the course of history. And today, it is a point of immense personal and professional pride to induct the best advocate and ally these workers have ever had. Scranton Joe, Union Joe, President Joseph R. Biden, the 46th President of the United States.
It's a good day. Thank you, Acting Secretary Sue. Thank you. I had no choice. My grandfather would come down from heaven if I didn't do this. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. Folks, you know, it's an incredible honor. I really mean that. And I want to thank Acting Secretary Sue and the Department of Labor for his incredible honor. You know, I measure the importance of any award I ever received, basically the character and consequence of the organization that's bestowing it. And the Department of Labor is an organization of character and consequence. And I'm honored. I'm honored to be joined today by leaders of character and conscience. Many of you sit right here in the front row. Half my cabinet's here. I want to thank all the labor leaders here today, including Liz and the AFL-CIO, members of the cabinet, including Interior Secretary Deb Haaland. You know, you talked about that list that the secretary brought in her pocket when she met with Trump, with Roosevelt. Trump, Freudian slip. And, I think she had a relative she left behind. Would you stand up, Madam Secretary, Secretary of Interior? I've been around a long time. She's the only secretary I've ever worked with or had working for me. When I say that's done, she said, no, we have this to do now. Thank you, kiddo. Look, you know, former Labor Secretary who's now in the White House Senior Advisors Corps is Tom Perez. Tom, thanks for sticking with me. And members of Congress, including Maine Senator Angus King and Shirley Pingree, where are you guys? All over here. Okay, there you go. And by the way, last night we were doing a Christmas event at the house, and I get finished talking to a group of folks from labor, and my wife said, and by the way, his wife's a member of a labor union too. I'm Jill Biden's husband. She's not here today, but she's been a long-time union member of the National Education Association. And it's fitting, with all these powerful women here, that we're gathered at the headquarters of the Department of Labor. named after one of America's greatest labor leaders. Now, that's not hyperbole. Frances Perkins. You know, we're honored to be joined by her grandson, Tomlin. Where are you, Tomlin? Thank you, bud. Saturday, March 25th, 1911. Frances sat down for afternoon tea at her home with a close friend from New York City. Suddenly, they hear the sound of a distant screams and sirens. The building was in flames. Her instinct was to run to the scene. As she approached the fire and smoke, she recognized the Triangle Shirt Factory, a company that employed hundreds of workers, mostly immigrants and women who worked long hours, crammed into tight quarters, where managers locked them inside to make clothing. In an instant, those workers are trapped in a brutal blaze with no safe exit. Some workers forced to climb out the windows, holding on for dear life until their fingers gave out. Others just jumped, prayed and jumped. A total of 150 lives were lost that day. It was the deadliest industrial disaster in American history. Frances was devastated, but that fire ignited a passion in her. It strengthened her resolve to fight even harder for working Americans and working families. In her decades of service, she became a fierce defender of unions and workers' rights, an architect of the New Deal, the first woman cabinet secretary, I increased on that a little bit because I know what my family's like. All the really bright people in my family are women. And the longest-serving Secretary of Labor in American history. God love you. And the story goes, after Franklin Roosevelt asked her to become his labor secretary, Frances Perkins immediately responded by outlining her goals, what she wanted done. She said, I want unemployment relief, overtime pay, child labor laws, minimum wage, workers' compensation, national health insurance, and Social Security. Many of the benefits we take for granted as a consequence of Frances' dedication, insight, and courage. But that, can you imagine walking up to Roosevelt saying, no, here, I'll take the job, but here's the deal, man. Let's get this straight. Like I said, a little bit like when I asked Frances to do my job. Hard-fought battles with Teamsters and, a real testament to her skill as an advocate for public servants. An example that through the Fair Labor Standards Act, she cemented the idea that if you're working a full-time job, you shouldn't have to live in poverty. A simple proposition. If you work a little extra, you should have extra money for overtime. Not a crazy idea. Some even argue about it now. Frances understood what my dad taught me. And you've heard me say this 1,000 times, but he really would say this. He said, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. That's my dad. In fact, during her 12 years in office, she accomplished everything on her list except expanded health care for health insurance. It took 65 years later and a guy named Barack Obama and I to get the Affordable Care Act passed. And thank God all of us here protected and expanded the Affordable Care Act. Look, it's clear that Frances Perkins and a generation of activists and labor leaders laid the groundwork for much of what we've accomplished in the last 4 years. We're fundamentally transforming the economy by breaking an economic orthodoxy that has failed this nation for generation after generation, in my view. Trickle-down economics, the notion that if the wealthy do very, very well, a little trickle off their tables onto our kitchen table. My dad used to say, nothing ever trickled on my table, honey. No, I'm serious. My dad was a really well-read man who didn't get to go. He went accepted to Johns Hopkins, but during the war he never got to go. But my dad was a well-read guy. Well, you know, the primary benefits for the very wealthy and biggest corporations were trickle-down economics. And that didn't do much for working people in the middle class and left too many people behind. Together we built an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. Because we know this simple truth. Wall Street didn't build America. The middle class built America. And unions built the middle class. That's a fact. In fact, as the Secretary of Treasury will tell you, I asked her to do a study because I was going to get hit because I knew they'd say by having unions increase in their numbers and their wages go up, we were going to cost people things. Guess what? The study the Treasury did show that when unions do well, all workers do well, union and non-worker, across the board. It matters, it works, it's fair. Kamala and I are so proud of the great job creation record of any, actually the greatest job creation of any single president in a single term. Over 6 million new jobs so far, including 1.5 million manufacturing and construction jobs. Good paying jobs you can raise a family on, don't have to require a 4-year degree. And get this, there are more women, especially mothers in the workforce, than ever before in American history. We're so damn proud to protected pensions of millions of union workers and retirees. When I signed the Butch-Lewis Act, think about that. Imagine what the average American would say if you were going to do that with their Social Security, which this guy wants to do. Imagine if he said your pension, you can't count it anymore. In addition, we've recovered more than $1 billion in back wages and damages for over 600,000 workers here in America. We push for a right to a living wage and your right to overtime pay. Jobs and factories are coming back home to America because we invested in the American agenda. We're modernizing American infrastructure. Last guy had the job, he had infrastructure week every week. Didn't build a damn thing. Well, guess what? We built a lot, and guess what's coming? Look, folks, one of the things that is frustrating, I knew this was going to happen because I've been around a long time. I talked over to the Secretary of Agriculture and other places. Guess what? All the things, we have $1.4 trillion in economic and infrastructure growth. That's thousands of good paying jobs. The CHIPS and Science Act, investing billions of dollars, building these fabs that are going to house hundreds of people working, thousands. They're going to be getting paid about average $102,000 a year and don't need a college degree. So much is going on. But it's going to take a little bit of time. But we got to make sure to protect the onslaught that's going to come, because it's hard to see right away. And by the way, I know I got criticized by putting as much of these programs in red states as blue states. Actually more. Well, guess what? The red state guy screwed it up. And we got a benefit. We represent all of America. Not just blue America, not just Democrats, but all of America. Look, as we do all this, we're buying America, using American workers, using American products. And we're standing up to America for American steelworkers against China's unfair trade practices. We've appointed a National Labor Relations Board that actually believes in unions, has pro-union members on the board. James Notion. And a special thank you to the chair of the board, Lauren McFerrin. Seriously, where are you, Lauren? There, thank you, Lauren. Don't be so shy. Raise your stand up. Let everybody see you. And it's no accident that petitions to form unions have doubled under my presidency. I got all this credit for walking the picket line. It never crossed my mind not to walk the picket line. No, I'm serious. I didn't think it was any big deal. Walked a lot of picket lines. In fact, I was president. I hadn't thought about that. But Pamela walked the picket line. We support the right to fair contracts. Here's one, that doesn't get enough attention. When workers in sectors like construction, manufacturing, mining inhale toxic silica dust on the job, it can lead to lung cancer and other deadly diseases. It's been a major problem for decades, even under Secretary Perkins. She led an investigation, but despite the science, big business blocked the regulation. but not on our watch, not on your watch. With your help, we carried France's mantle and issued a rule that finally reduces such dangerous exposure. And by the way, our Secretary of Veterans Affairs is sitting in front of me here, one of the really good guys. I really mean it. And you know, what we not only did with the Chips and Science Act, and then we went and made sure we were going to take care of veterans. We said all those folks in my generation exposed to Agent Orange couldn't prove that their illness was a consequence of it. And all those like my son's generation that exposed to toxic burn pits in Iraq and other places, that it's assumed that my son came back, for example, with stage 4 glioblastoma, more brain injuries than anything else. And guess what? They're entitled to the benefits that they were going to get if they had not lost their lives. Their families. And to ad lib here a little bit, I think the American people are beginning to figure out all we're doing is basically decent and fair. Just basically decent and fair. We have a lot of sacred obligations. I got in trouble for saying this before, but we only have one truly sacred obligation: to prepare those we send into harm's way and prepare for them and their families when they come home. And that's a simple proposition. Finally, that's happened. What you got, another million now? 1 million you're taking care of. Make no apologies. I'm so damn proud of that. Look, folks, in our 4 years together, we made historic investments that have changed the course of the nation's future and will have a lasting impact for decades to come. And I'm here to say, to state the obvious, we could not have done this without the dedicated professionals here at the Department of Labor and all across this administration. Could not have done it. And I'm damn proud to be known as the most pro-labor administration in American history, because we are. We are. We make no apologies. Look, let me close with this. Francis Perkins once said, "The people are what matter to government, and the government should aim to give people, all people, under its jurisdiction, the best possible life." The best possible life. For my dad, it was a simple proposition. Everybody deserves a shot. No guarantee, but a shot. Everybody deserves a shot. All of you have helped upheld that vision, putting people first, no matter who they are. Another important legacy of our administration, making sure we learn from history, lift up stories that often have gone untold. Earlier this year, during Women's History Month, I signed the first ever executive order on recognizing and honoring women's history to increase representation of women in historic sites all across America. Today, I'm proud to stand here in the Francis Perkins building, headquarters of the Labor Department, to designate Francis Perkins Homestead in Newcastle, Maine, a national monument. And Secretary Holland is also going to be announcing 5 new National Historic Landmarks to honor women's contributions to American history. It includes Charleston Cigar Factory, excuse me, where black women led worker strike that opposed gender and racial discrimination, advocated for better pay for working conditions. Look, too many people want to rewrite history or ignore it. Look, all we want to do is make sure we record history, the good, bad, and the indifferent, who we are. I was able to show up in Indian country and apologize for what we did to Indian Americans, for the schools we made them go to and took them right off the reservations for their parents. Throughout our history, women's vision and achievements have strengthened this nation, to state the obvious. That's why I've kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America. It includes having more women in senior access all across the board, starting with my amazing Vice President, Kamala Harris. It's about time we honor them in building an American Women's Museum and History Museum on the Mall. And the Women's Suffrage National Monument on the National Mall. And by the way, it's time for Congress to move and authorizing that legislation moving forward. They should do it now before this Congress ends. Folks, our administration is coming to an end, but our work continues. We get up. We keep going. We keep the faith. I know I will. I know you will. You just remember who in the hell we are. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. Nothing, nothing, nothing. So God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. And now, I will sign the proclamation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Here. Okay.
Got a few more people.
Oh, buddy. Hey. You ready?
Okay, we're good.
Got everybody?
Yes, I think so.